Salutations, respected viewers. I'm George from Ireland. So, how the devil are you? Anyway, this video is about the Blueshirts, which has been requested by one of my myriad, exceedingly faithful fans. So, who were the Blueshirts? Well, the Blueshirts were a political movement in Ireland in the 1930s and the 1940s. But their initial official name was the Army Comrades Association. So, it'd be fair to say that they were a fascist organisation, and they openly and indeed proudly call themselves that. Now, the word fascist was nothing like as controversial as it is now in the early 30s. So now it's completely toxic. Why are they called Army Comrades? Hello there, it's evening here in the British Isles, Diane. So I noticed your surname, Malloy, which is distinctly Hibernian in flavour. Anyhow, so Army, really referring to the IRA, the Irish Republican Army. So this was 1932, if memory serves, because there'd been a conflict in Ireland on and off 1916 to 1923, but they're really talking about the IRA from 1916 up to 1921, and that difference is crucial up to 1921, not the next 2 years, because of the Irish Civil War, but I shan't delve into it. So it's meant to be as in for men who'd previously served either in the IRA up to and including 1921 or indeed in the Irish Army, because remember there was a treaty signed on the 6th of December 1921 which stated that the major portion of Ireland, that's to say 6 in 20 counties, could secede from the United Kingdom, form the Irish Free State, and indeed it happened. The leader of the Blueshirts was Owen O'Duffy. Many people think that he's a fairly ridiculous figure. Gael O'Duffy doesn't quite trip off the tongue. Anyway, the Fianna Fáil party won an election that year, 1932, and it was touch and go as to whether the ruling party, Gael, would accept that, would indeed transfer power to this other political party, because there'd been a civil war in Ireland, 1922 to 23, between two factions, nationalists and Republicans, we sometimes say. Should this Treaty of 1921 be accepted or not? Okay, should the major portion of Ireland leave the UK and be a free state, accept partition, or was that unacceptable? Okay, there was not unionists. Some people saying no, the treaty is unacceptable, that the IRA ought to fight on, and they would only accept a 32-county Republican. There are various other quibbles, but that was it about. So the split in Sinn Féin in 1922 caused that civil war. And the losing side was Sinn Féin, but they were divided again in 1926 when Eamon de Valera, he formed his own political party, Fianna Fáil, said that they would take seats in Dáil Éireann, that's to say the lower house of the Irish Parliament, well, and indeed take them in the Seanad as well, the upper house. And Eamon de Valera, he led his party to take the oath of allegiance to King George V, saying, I shall be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King George V, who was King of Ireland. That's right, not of Northern Ireland, not of Southern Ireland. Actually, the title was King of Ireland, as well as various other titles. So Eamon de Valera did that. Fianna Fáil got into Dáil Éireann. 1932 won the election, and that was that. They were in government. So de Valera became Taoiseach, as in Prime Minister. Now, the Blueshirts detested de Valera because of the Civil War, who'd been the opposite side to, well, Michael Collins and so on. Anyway, that's too much of the backstory, I suppose. But the Eamon de Valera and his Fianna Fáil party were in government, and Gael was the major opposition party. There are several other opposition parties. I don't want to dwell too much on parliamentary politics in the south of Ireland in the 1930s, because the Blueshirts were largely, well, exclusively an extra-parliamentary organisation, and the party was soon outlawed by Eamon de Valera. Well, perhaps party isn't even the correct word, because I'm not aware they contested any elections. So they renamed themselves the League of Youth, and indeed they were prohibited, so they renamed themselves the Irish Christian Front. I'm not sure if they existed in any other guise, but you think usually legislation saying we are going to outlaw this organisation, and it doesn't matter by what name or pretense it meets. Even if you rename yourself, if it is in essence the same organisation, then it is still banned. So Owen O'Duffy, he came from the Midlands of Ireland. We tend to accentuate it that way in Ireland, Midlands, not Midlands. I don't remember which county it was from. Was it Westmeath? And he had this sort of faintly dopey Bog of Allen accent. And he was in the Irish Volunteers before the First World War. That was the organisation which launched the Easter Rising and became known as the Irish Republican Army, or IRA. And then in January 1919, a conflict kicked off between the IRA and the Crown Forces, and so he was involved in that. And hello there, Brett, when a treaty was signed in 1921, he zealously supported that treaty. As I say, the Civil War broke out in 1922 by the two branches of Sinn Féin and the IRA that split whether to accept the treaty or not. Okay, so the extremists were against and the moderates were for, and obviously the man at the street was for the treaty. Indeed, there'd been an election earlier in 1922, and the issue was really to accept this or not. Sinn Féin put up pro-treaty and anti-treaty candidates in every constituency. That was by agreement within the party. And the pro-treaty candidates won 75% of the vote. Remember, the Labour Party was pro-treaty. The former Unionists were pro-treaty. The Catholic Church was pro-treaty. Really big business. Just about everyone, I suppose, the civil service, if it has an opinion at all, was pro-treaty. There was on the far left was against. But anyway, I don't want to talk too much about the Civil War. So Owen O'Duffy was on the pro-treaty side. So if you talk about the IRA really from 1922 onwards, that's anti-treaty people. But it was somewhat involved, was very involved with the Sinn Féin party. Then Sinn Féin split when Eamon de Valera led his large minority out. So about 40% of the party followed him. And they made to sever links with the IRA. And eventually, de Valera would turn on his former organisation with a vengeance. So Owen O'Duffy, he can be seen on YouTube. There's some footage of him going to Liverpool in the late 20s, I think, to speak about some sort of Irish sports festival. Politicians have no idea, do they? And you can hear his very culture accent. I don't want to be too demeaning. So the Blueshirts, they sometimes clashed with the IRA in the 1930s, saying no free speech for traitors. Both sides would say that, but the Blueshirts, they sometimes said they wanted to improve relations with Great Britain, and he'd been mollified Great Britain, going to talk to Liverpool about some sports competition. Owen O'Duffy, but on the other hand, saying that the North was a rock in the road and must be coerced and so forth. So they clashed with the IRA, and indeed some people were killed. Not a lot in several clashes, but mostly low-level violence. Was Oswald Mosley a fan of the Blueshirts? Jack, the film fanatic, is asking. That's an excellent question. Not so far as I'm aware. I'm not aware of him making any comment on this. Now, Mosley was highly atypical as a Conservative MP to some extent endorsing the IRA's cause, saying that the Royal Irish Constabulary Special Reserve, that's commonly called the Black and Tans, that they were devilish and so forth. Supposedly some of his former soldiers from the Great War, Irishmen, had come to see him in the House of Commons and said that the RIC were behaving appallingly, and he completely endorsed these accusations. So anyway, he accepted the partition of Ireland and the major portion of Ireland leaving the UK, whereas hardline British nationalists tended to be ardent supporters of the Loyalist cause in Ulster. So back to the Blueshirts. They crossed swords with the IRA and communists, and several people were killed. And I really do mean several. It's not a large thing, and just one by one in different incidents. But there were lots of low-level acts of violence. I read The IRA in the Twilight Years by Unshin McKeown, who I think was involved in the IRA ages ago in the 60s or something. And he obviously has got various clippings from the press that Tom Barry would meet with IRA men in the Grand Parade in Cork, and some evenings there'd be a battle royal between the IRA and Blueshirts. So the Blueshirts, they saw them part of the wider fascist movement, which has roots in the nationalism of various European countries, and it's corporatist. It's certainly in Ireland. It's pro-clerical. It's anti-communist. It's not necessarily. It's socialist, but anti-communist. If you sort of mean believing in maybe in higher taxation, in more common ownership. They're not against private property per se, in better social services, more welfare, and so forth. But they're viciously anti-communist, and they are anti-intellectual. They feel disdain for civil liberties such as freedom of expression, an independent judiciary, fair trials and so forth, habeas corpus. They're militaristic, chauvinistic, anti-feminist. Some people say conservative with knobs on, which is an oversimplification. So in 1922, the Fascist Party in Italy had become the government, and Mussolini had become prime minister, and he had how to put this, demolished democracy, or piecemeal. There's probably a better word for it, but I can't think what it is. And there were fascist parties in several European countries which eventually took over. In Portugal, arguably in Spain, certainly there's a fascist element to it. It's maybe ultra-conservative, these things overlap. Where else? Possibly in Greece, General Metaxas. You could even say the Polish government at the time was like that. In Hungary, in Turkey, you could say that. Some sort of right-wing authoritarianism, charismatic leadership, a cult of the personality, an appeal to the mythical past, an emphasis on brutality, sort of a necrophile discourse. That's what it's like, really. They believed they liked wearing uniforms. It reflected this sort of disillusionment with democracy. Remember, the Great Depression was on, and there was mass unemployment. The situation in Ireland was terrible, large-scale emigration. Anyway, the people who had been the Blueshirts, they later merged with Gael, and I think it was the Ratepayers Party, to form Fine Gael. And Fine Gael get abused as Blueshirts to this day, just occasionally. And I remember a woman, a very liberal left opinion, saying, "Oh, that's unfair because they were only a third of Fine Gael." But anti-fascists say, "Well, you can have no truck, no compromise, never cooperate with fascists because they're just sheer evil." So that was that. People thought that communism was the real enemy. They heard about all the barbarities that were occurring in the Soviet Union. This deliberately created famine in Ukraine, for instance, and millions of refugees fleeing from Stalin's bloody rule. So that was that. Obviously, the National Socialists came to office in Germany in January 1933, and we know what happened there, and became very oppressive and carried out genocide. But nobody knew that was going to happen in the 1930s. There was some anti-Semitic rhetoric on the part of the Blueshirts. They pointed out that Dr. Robert Briscoe, who was an anti-treaty politician, was Jewish, and I can't think if there were any Jewish people on the other side, but that was that. So there was more, what's the word, anti-Semitism and continental fascism in Ireland. Interesting how few former Blueshirts went to fight for nationalists in Spain. Clearly went ultra-nationalists for the sake of Ireland, I suppose. Yeah, well, several hundred went to Spain, actually, including a certain Dr. James Burke from Cork. And he's mentioned in Unshin McCohen's book, Ned Cronin. Well, hello. Someone I know is saying hello. There are various things that have been said that one man refused to get on the boat in Galway. But no, the Blueshirts went, several hundred of them, and they came back after a few months. And the Spanish general supposed to be commanding them said the military efficiency of this unit is absolutely nil. Why didn't the Spanish just use them? Just say you have to go and attack the Spanish nationalists against Republicans. Okay, I don't want to talk about the Civil War in Spain too much. So it's really about Christianity, and particularly Catholicism. But when the Blueshirts briefing themselves the Irish Christian Front, they said they were open to any Irishman of the Christian faith. So that would suggest it's Protestants as well. Having said that, I'm not aware of a single Protestant who joined the Blueshirts. In the north, there was briefly a loyalist fascist organization. I know loyalists are often abused as fascists by Republicans, but a loyalist organization would actually called itself fascist because it was almost a fashionable term at the time. And I know this is just bandied about generally as something pejorative, as part of political contumely, I suppose. Vituperating each other by dubbing each other fascists, even though that's highly inaccurate and provably so. And that's why people will offer a furious refutation of this accusation if there's such a branding reproach is hurled at them. With the Blueshirts, they reflected a more general malaise, this dissolution with democracy, belief that parliamentary government had failed. They needed to feel the smack of firm government, and we can't do things by half measures. We've got to tackle unemployment that way, and just use force, and don't give a damn about legal niceties. So they like stomping around in uniforms, going to various graves of various people. There was a troika whom they exalted. That was Michael Collins, who'd been killed in the Civil War by the irregulars. They would dub the IRA. They wouldn't want to call them IRA because the IRA is a positive thing for them, 1916 to 21. And they Arthur Griffiths, who died of exhaustion 10 days before Collins. And then the other one would have been Kevin O'Higgins in 1927. Our Minister for Justice was assassinated by the IRA. He's the one who was very inflexible in the Civil War. I don't recall who said it of Kevin O'Higgins. He was incapable of remorse or regret. The one, when justifying execution in that trial, said, where he quoted that famous Latin tag, and memory won't tell me who said it, salus populi lex suprema est, the safety of the people is a supreme law. So anything else to say about them? Yeah, so they merged with Fine Gael, which called itself the Commonwealth Party, was calling itself that up until 1949, not the Republican Party, wanting to maintain fraternal links with various countries, not just Great Britain, but Australia, Canada, and so forth, where so many of us had kith and kin overseas. Hello, Mrs. G. So that's just a little bit about them and their whatever it's called, their symbols they came up with. And yes, they really did wear blue shirts, and there was a branch of it in University College Cork. Anything else about them? So they would say that capitalism was too cruel, was too barbaric. There's so much suffering which must be avoided. But they weren't against private property per se. There were green shirts in Romania, Camacha Verde. The black shirts in Italy. Mosley indeed used black shirt as synonymous with fascist. Brown shirts in Germany. I don't know about the names of the other fascist movements, what colour shirts they had in other countries. Obviously there was Christus Rex, or the Rexists, the Catholic fascists in Belgium, and there was the Nationale Socialist Beweging in the Netherlands, and there was Austro-fascism under Dr. Engelbert Dollfuss in Austria, and on, probably other words in Slovakia, the Hlinka Guards, named after that priest, Father Andrew Hlinka, Ustaše in Croatia, and yeah, probably fascist movements otherwise, the Nationalsamling in Norway under Vidkun Quisling, Argentina, Peronists. There was a genuinely multiracial fascist party in Brazil. So they're part of a wider movement who thought that they had found a solution to tackle social problems, and that was that. And so they favoured a more socialist style economic model. Yeah, and they didn't spell it out. They were not terribly interested in economics, but not abolishing private property totally, allowing smallholders to keep things, but they said they were against exploitation. Was it just hot air? Was it just guff? I don't think they had anything well worked out plan. It wasn't very coherent. It's possibly being all things to all people. But very anti-communist, a bit anti-Semitic. So that was them. So they came back from Spain and they sustained very few casualties, and they largely, lost traction. Some people were agitating for the Third Reich, were rooting for them in the Second World War. IRA people as well. Just really anything to see Great Britain defeated. Then the North would join the Republic. That was the idea. Oh, sorry, it weren't actually a Republic until 1949. And there were some anti-Semites high up in the Irish government, like that bloke Beecham, what's his name? I forget his name, who was our ambassador in Berlin. But he was not in the blue shirt, so far as I know. Anything else about this organization? Well, Ono Duffy, he died in relative obscurity in about 1944. Supposedly they were plotting a coup d'etat, but it never actually came off. And that people said if Michael Collins had lived, he would have been a fascist leader. We really don't know that. He died at the age of 32, so this is surmising. Now, he had little time for democracy. He was certainly a man who would just railroad things through, was notorious for his brutality, even amongst his IRA confrères. So someone I think who ought to have been decanonized long ago. But they were really ceased to exist in the late 1940s. Maybe some of them were writing for some sort of Catholic nationalist magazines in the 1950s. That's it. Possibly influenced Sean South, as in the guy, that ballad is about Sean South of Gary Owen. That's it. They're quite judgmental and craw thumpers, wanted giving people a lash of the crozier, very pro-clerical, a bit xenophobic, that really Catholicism being the pride and glory of Ireland. But, most people in Ireland would have agreed with that. Eamon de Valera would have agreed with that, and he was their nemesis to some extent. But they never assassinated him or even tried to. So for them, it was mostly all talk. They weren't going to do anything in Ireland. Some people say we're too moderate. People felt scorn for them, and they didn't even bother contesting elections, just like the British Union of Fascists didn't. So that's the blue shirts, a sort of much worked over era in Irish history. They clashed in West Cork, actually, with IRA men, and they exploited this Cork-Kerry rivalry. And they existed in Dublin. I'm not sure that they were very active anywhere else in Ireland. I always have to look at everything you talk about. I learn a lot anyways. Well, Mrs. G, I'm very pleased to hear it. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your attention, and thank you for donations. Please keep them rolling in. It's the only way that this channel is ever able to keep going. And please follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and hello there, Diane. And book online lessons with me in all sorts of subjects, humanities, I scarcely need to repeat. Get my help with writing anything, editing anything, or translating things from French, Spanish, Italian, German, Romanian, or Russian. Book me as your tour guide in London. If you wanted to donate on PayPal, it's georgecallahan79@gmail.com. Okay, goodbye.